G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day and so far a fantastic weekend as well. Now I got some blood test results back that I'd had earlier in the week, and yes, it does look like I'll be starting chemotherapy again on Monday. It's just a bit of a check and balance to see how I am going, but I think you guys can tell I've recovered from the surgery and then that first round of chemo fairly well, considering how sore or how sick I was during it. But next week I apologise if I am slow on some videos. But legends, of course, today, as always, this has gone from being reporting on news over 10 or 15 minutes to now basically just a daily podcast of an hour. And I don't apologise for anything. But legends, we do have a lot to go over. We're going to look at the maps. We're going to talk about Kursk. And in relation to Kursk, of course, we know there's a gas exchange there. And I have had someone I know who works in the gas industry, senior there, has given me some insight into how Ukraine turning off the taps is going to look for Ukraine, for Russia, for the EU. And we'll be going over all of that at length. And some of our suspicions were correct. And we asked the question of, was this a huge mistake? But it also aligns with some of the other investigating that you and I have done into Russia and Ukraine's hybrid war, to do with some of the icebreakers as well. But it also has to do with then what is now the relevance of the Kursk operation. So we'll be talking about Kursk. We'll be looking at what Zelensky has said in an interview about Kursk, as well just about the overall battlefield situation, as well as having then elections in Ukraine and how that could benefit Putin, but could it also benefit Ukraine? Then we need to talk about then what Russia has said about apparently what is being presented by America as far as having some level of ceasefire or an end to the war. And then, of course, what we're going to do is we'll talk about the knife fight of what we spoke about yesterday. So look, let's actually start there, as I have had a friend send over some information, a very experienced guy, and I'll talk on some of these points as well. And what we also have is a 17-minute video released of the Russian soldier who was involved in this. Now, I'm not going to go through the full 17-minute video, but if you'd like to, it will be on my Telegram. So I've got a little bit more of an idea about what has occurred here from some clips that have been pulled out and translated here. Now, again, if the translation is wrong, I apologize. I don't speak any Russian. I don't speak any Ukrainian, and I rely on this. Sometimes if it's slightly incorrect, just misinterpreted, then I apologize as well. So this is, of course, him speaking, I believe it was to Russia Today, although I may be incorrect on this, saying, he said at the end, "All right, brother, you already killed me, let me go." I also told him, let me go, and started by saying that, byes to the sky to his mum, as we heard in that footage. He laid down, he was saying goodbyes then to the sky. He mumbled something about being a better fighter. It was not important to me. He had a grenade on his chest. I opened it, put it under his vest, and then said goodbye and told him, "Goodbye, brother." Then he blew up, and then I shot him 3 times. He just had half of his body. I shot him again as a check shot to, I guess, make sure he was dead. I guess, painting this as a way to put that guy out of his suffering. Now, under international laws of armed conflict, you are not allowed to do this. There has been Western Special Forces soldiers in a lot of trouble before, and investigating. You can Google any of this if you'd like, for doing dead checks, and then it was British, I believe, as far as putting someone out of their misery. We hear about that grenade, what actually happened with that grenade there, as there was some speculation over whose grenade it was. But this does present us with the low density of men at the front line, and we're going to talk over from my someone I know very well, ex-service member as well, about hand-to-hand combatives. He had a combat mission to put the flag there. His friend got killed, so I immediately charged. As soon as he was killed, I went into melee with this, of course, that knife, against the Ukrainian who killed my friend, and I killed him hand-to-hand, as we saw. Then a counter-attack started. This is what we didn't see, and 6 people came and tried to kill me. I contacted my commander and explained what exactly the situation was here, and he tells me, "Come on, hold out, bro, they're a bit." He asked to find where the headquarters is and where the warehouse is. where there's gas storage is there. Well, in short, I made a lot of things there. So talking that then there was more after that. So one hell of a situation. And we're going to talk over knife fighting and hand-to-hand combat as well. But this is something I have seen a hell of a lot. Ukrainian accounts saying things like this. There's a horrific video of a Ukrainian soldier losing his life in a close combat knife fight with a Russian Ukrainian soldier, and the video is absolutely horrific. I strongly recommend you do not watch it because it's probably the worst video from this war. I've seen a lot of awful videos, but I could not get through this one. It is more than just heartbreaking. Now, there's some things in this. I actually firmly believe the opposite. This is heartbreaking. It is savage. It is horrible. But this should be exactly what supporters of this war, those who are not fighting, this is exactly what they should be seeing, because it shows what war is actually like. It's not glorious. It's not the Su-34 on a poster. It's not an F-16 on a poster. It is this. It's mud. It's blood. It's tears. It's an absolute catastrophe. And this sort of footage, it does show those who are cheering for more war, cheering for expansion. It shows them what they are asking other men to do with themselves not willing to do this. And what I'll say in this is, let us be honest, if this was the other way around, people would be sadistically celebrating this, as I am seeing some Russian pages celebrate it absolutely disgustingly as well. And that this is, very similar to a lot of the drone videos. And I'd say the drone videos, the majority of which I see dropping grenades on guys who are wounded, hauled to combat, or surrendering, the vast majority, in my opinion, of what I see, and I'm not the only one that shares this opinion, are from Ukrainian drones doing this, and these are shared and celebrated as well. And it is just as horrible, if not more horrible. At least something in this feels a bit more. At least it's two humans, not a computer and someone 50k or 20k's away doing it. I don't know. That's just how I feel. But many people are pushing not to watch it because it goes against the narrative that these are orcs and not humans, and the reverse on the other side, that these are Ukrops, that these are whatever you want to call against the Ukrainians. But what it's showing is these are just two men fighting with families, with people that love them, with friends, in a absolutely horrible situation. So I believe people who are supporting or cheering or wanting continuation, this is exactly what they should be saying, because if you're not fighting, you are asking, whatever side you're on, you're asking other people to do this on your behalf, and you should see what they are prepared to actually step into. But I agree with his last point here. This young man deserved more. Well, he deserved this war to never start. He deserved more support, more equipment, more leadership, more of everything. So he would never have been in that position. Exactly. These guys, both of them, should never have been in that position. And this is something which one of my followers has pointed out, and I've seen others point towards this. I read a crazy comment on Surik Maps about this subject, about the irony of how this video is bringing a lot of people together, which I actually have noticed it bringing people together while almost silencing those death-wishing piece of shits. And this is a weird sort of byproduct of something like this, and what it has shown is that these are both humans, and I believe for the narrative, on the extremes of both, that's not a good thing for their narrative. Does that make sense? So let's go over close combatives, knife fighting, and myself. I've been through not the most recent Australian Army close combatives, whatever they call it now, but I've been through both the original one and the newer one, what's developing what is now, and got my ass handed to me in every single time. I'm a lot heavier now, but back in the day I was around 70 kilos and 5'6". Not much going for me. But this is from a friend of mine. Maybe after the war we'll talk about some other things more publicly, but consolidated list of talking points written with full understanding that I was not there, and I don't know why the Ukrainian made the decisions he made or what influenced his decision-making process. Not meant to criticise him personally, but to suggest some things to discuss for training and development. Okay, so that's where this needs to start. Point number one, tactical movement and approach onto key terrain or objectives, and the use of depth and cover, including cover by fire or direct support from teammates. And this is what we do see. Rushing that building, you close the gap with that building, which is not what you want to do. Something with a knife, you want to, if you use a gun v knife, you want to have as much room as possible in case you get lunged. You don't want to end up on the ground in this. But furthermore, direct support from teammates. And this is what we hear this Ukrainian soldier yelling out for his teammate who we believe was killed. Communications within team and external support, such as drone pilots to coordinate efforts. So something like SBR, like Soldier's Personal Radio, something like that. Know where you are, know what is going on. Need for infantry to have high quality and frequent training in close quarters fighting, including ability to fight longer durations in full kit. We need to accept this as a part of combat operations, especially for infantry units. Even in a battle space full of drones, pinpoint rocket barrages, and other high-level shit, the common soldier can do nothing about. So this other stuff, this is what my commander, one of my best commanders used to say, was control the controllables. And although these are in the battlefield, close quarters fighting is still incredibly relevant, and we did move away from it. And there is a point in this as well, actually not just about, being able to fight and having the training, but also about your physical ability to continue fighting as well. Because fighting, if you've ever rolled in some jiu-jitsu or anything like this, you'll know how physically demanding that is. And the Australian Army has recently changed its complete combatives program. Now, this was originally introduced by Mr. Paul Kale, a friend of mine back in 2015. Now, if you want to look up Paul Kale, he was actually in a very similar hand-to-hand situation like this, and well, he's still alive, so I can tell you who won as the Infantry Integrated Combat, the IIC. It wasn't called that when I did it, that's what I was looking up. This methodology has been adopted army-wide. It focuses on close fight in a small team while training on full kit. So you're in your body armor. You're not just rolling in a fucking gi or something. You're in all your gear, making use of your helmet, your body armor, your rifle strikes, compact clearance blades to either subdue or kill adversaries. Again, one of the biggest things in this, when I was doing it, was your hands are soft mush. Pull out a magazine and hit someone with that, headbutt them with your helmet, lean on them with your body armor. It's heavy. All of this, it is a fight to the death. There's no rules in this. And one thing the Army has really started doing is compact clearance blades. This is not only issued now, but a lot of guys carried these for a long time. And I want to talk about this for a second, but there was an interesting point in one of these other ones, maybe I deleted it, but is to do with your secondary, either your secondary weapon system or a knife or something, also being, say, like lanyarded to yourself, so you can't then lose it, or you can pull on the lanyard. And I'll just quickly show you. This is like what I would have. This is a very compact little blade, but you can see just the width on something like this as well of this. Now, of course, I've never had to use this, thankfully, because I probably would have lost. But something like this, although this isn't a great one because it should have a ring on the back of it so you can get your finger through it, whatever, but this would sit right down on my belt or bottom pull out of my body armor. So if my arms ended up, down, and I couldn't get to my rifle or couldn't get to a magazine, I could put my arms down where they're not expecting, because it's going to be the opposite of where they're going for, to pull out something, that's a bit stiff, something like this. But it should also, through one of these then hoops, be lanyarded with a ring pull, so you can get a finger through it. That helps retention of the system. And lanyarded, like if you have a secondary, if you have a 9mm, you have some settled pistol, it should be on you as well. Now, let's continue through this. That secondary weapon systems are still relevant, especially for units likely to engage. I cut myself open. Anyway, shows my knife skills. Are likely to engage in close quarters fighting. This highlights the importance of working in pairs. If you are on your own, you are on your own. And this is it. 1 is none, 2 is 1, 3 is 2. And you are on your own. And sadly for this gentleman, he was on his own. And so was the other guy. Sorry, I'm bleeding out here. They were on their own. And this could have gone one way or the other. Would have been a different story if the bloke had support and a bag full of grenades. Maybe not Tim Kennedy full, but half a dozen at least. I feel sorry for him having gone through that. And for the Russian as well. This one will fuck his head up. And it is absolutely horrible. It is one of the worst things imaginable, and you can see it really affected myself yesterday. So let's continue through some of these slides. That said, I wouldn't be surprised if this wasn't the Russians' first knife fight, and it is something Western armies should consider. Some armies are stacked with guys who have rough lives. There's enough videos of brutality coming from this war that it shouldn't be a surprise. The West seems to want to stack its infantry ranks with diversity and equality, and potential adversaries are stacking them with rough men who are wired for violence. And I say this about the infantry. I say all the time that you're never going to have a good infantry with guys who are going to make good politicians, or guys, or maybe not good, but acceptable politicians, or acceptable on the ad somewhere in the West. But these were the rough guys you need as well. And this is why I say the resilience in the Ukrainian and the Russian army is a lot more than I believe some other militaries around the world or societies would have. And we see these guys as well. Furthermore, last slide. Once he was in the fight, it appeared the East Russian was possibly more skilled and experienced in close combat and was mentally prepared and armed for it. The biting and such shows he was in it to win it. And this is the biggest thing you learn in that combatives program with knives, with whatever, is this: one of you is going to die here. Bite, kick, scream, anything. There was a story, I hope I'm not doing anything here to anyone, there was a story of a dead body ending up with 9mm rounds in his skull because he got, all he could get was a mag, and just smacking him with it. I know these dudes often lead hard lives, so it's possible this wasn't his first game of knifey spoony, but it is, of course, a horrible, horrible situation of what has occurred. So before stop bleeding. All right, here we go. So we're going to look, that's pretty heavy. We'll look at something a little bit more funny. This is a typical cat here. This is said to be a Ukrainian drone, and this cat then jumps up, doing some ninja stuff here, and takes out this drone, then smacking into a pole, and then at the end, the cat coming over. I had a cat for many years, and I am not surprised by that at all. So let's talk about Kursk, and we'll be looking at the maps for this as well. So Ukraine needs to control the informational space. This is something that became very aware for me recently of some of my friends in the back end, is that Ukraine's industrial power is its information, that if it can, control and dominate the information space, which it did for the first 2.5 years of this war, or 2 years of this war, it dominates that. That affects voting, it affects democratic countries, therefore it can affect the amount of military aid flowing in, okay? Absolutely, but Ukraine need to maintain dominance in this informational space to continue that aid flowing in. And if anything says issues to me about what is occurring within the Ukrainian ranks within the front line, it isn't the few hundred square kilometres that are coming under Russian control per month. People say that's the collapse. I don't, yes, areas are collapsing, but I'm not seeing that as the most screaming thing for desperate. What is screaming desperation for me is the blatant desperation to control the informational space, either through censorship or blatant misinformation. And what I'll say here is I believe that no one is turning away more people from supporting Ukraine than Zelensky at this point, at least individually. I believe that NATO, for the first 2 years, was a net positive for Ukraine support. Now I believe that NATO is turning away 50 times more people than it is bringing in. So let's talk then about what I am getting at here. And a lot of this is getting at what is occurring in Kursk, but then an overall view of this war too. And we'll touch on some sit here. It's going to go back and forward a little bit. So there was an interview, Zelensky and his wife, that was taken in Ukrainian. So it is dubbed here again. Not dubbed, sorry. There is captions. If it is wrong, I apologize. Kursk is a very strong trump card in all negotiations, especially with countries that are very important to us, especially with countries in the global south. I never thought it would have a big impact on them. Why? Are they influenced by the fact that Russia is not winning? The Russian army, let's skip forward. And the Russian army is not winning on Russian territory, and the Russian troops were increasing their contingent and could do nothing. Let's continue over 4 months. Even the factor of them taking North Korean contingent to come into play. Where did they send it? Exactly there. So the North Koreans went here. I think that this was their tactical mistake. Now, why did the North Koreans go there? Well, there was deal signed between North Korea and Russia to defend in there, as well as because that is Russian land. That's why we did say if we think if there's going to be a cross into Sumy, it's likely the North Koreans, if they are there at all, may participate in Kursk, but may not participate in Sumy. And this is why as well Russia did declare this a terror operation, so then they could bring in other units, more domestic units, and potentially North Koreans as well. So let's look at what has been said here. This is Kyiv Independent talking exactly about what Zelensky has said here. And what I will say is Zelensky is outwardly delusional about some elements like Kursk. Now, I'm unsure if this is from commanders feeding him overly optimistic reports or not, but we'll talk about this more and how he's turning so many away at the moment. Ukraine's incursion into Russia's Kursk Oblast, quote, a very strong trump card in any negotiations. This is not a trump card in negotiations. It's 481 kilometre squares by deep state map compared to 111,000. There's no vital industrial centre right there. Remember that for a second. He also says, especially with countries that are very important to us, the countries for the Global South. And the Global South is incredibly important in this war. And these are the most important countries for Russia and Ukraine, especially for Ukraine to have impact on Russia. And this is where the peace summit failed to gain a foothold. It failed to get that Global South. We always knew Germany and Australia and the US and whoever else was going to be on board with this, but it needs to get those Global South countries where Russia has since swung a lot of its market across as it was lost in Europe. Kursk is not this. Those countries are not looking across and going, this is devastating, it's a trump card, it's this or that. Even if outwardly someone were to say that, behind closed doors, the military intelligence go, look, at the end of the day, there is a gas exchange there which has decreased in its importance very recently, as well as it's not that much. I never thought it would be such a big impact on them because they were so influenced by the idea of invincible Russia. Russia's been ramping up its efforts to push Ukraine out of embattled Kursk, and what has happened is Russia has taken back around about 50% of what was occupied at one point. Kyiv is wanting to leverage this in possible negotiations. Again, the leverage even at 10-1, which is no reason why it would be 10-1. It's nowhere near as important as other areas. This is delusion in this, and it's a focus on informational war, similar to what we saw Russia when they were on the back foot through 2022 lean on. And that's what I say. If anything is showing me that situations are worse, it's not those kilometre squares. It's not that. It's focus on controlling information and censoring things rather than the military at the front. It's not those kilometre squares falling. It's that is telling me more than anything else. In recent months, Ukraine has been defensive as Russia reportedly recaptured almost half of lost territory and deployed reinforcements, including apparently North Korean troops. Zelensky called the deployment of North Korean soldiers in the region a tactical mistake. Kursk has had plenty of tactical mistakes, but there's one very large elephant in the room, mate. It's maybe not the North Koreans. That's why there are 12,000 North Koreans who came with weapons and the North Korean soldiers who also couldn't do anything. All this works against Russia and is a strong argument for us. Well, according to Zelensky's own number, it should now be 9,000 North Koreans because he has said that 3,000 were killed or wounded. Okay, 12,000 came in the beginning. But this is exactly why some like I think this is a bit of a ghost of Pyongyang, because you're saying this, it works against Russia and is a great argument for us. What have the North Koreans given Russian? They don't speak the language. They don't have any combat experience. We don't know their training deployed into here. What has it given Ukraine? Long-range strategic strikes, apparently a massive leverage into the global south, according to Zelensky. And this is why people are going, it seems awful convenient that there's no North Korean, like solid concrete evidence, and it's helping Ukraine a lot. But while we're talking about this, I'll skip forward a little bit because we're going to be talking about the gas exchange in Kursk. And before we get stuck into all this later in the video, they talk about the Yamal pipeline and how Poland could from this, but it makes Kursk a weirder place to mount an offensive. Suja becomes completely worthless and useless as a possible threat. So the whole purpose of capturing that gas exchange, if that was the point, now that it's cut off and that gas isn't flowing and say it will never flow, well then now it's sort of become a bit pointless in that, if this makes sense. So before we talk about some more of Zelensky, we need to then have a look over some things happening in Kursk. So let's zoom up there. Now, there's no changes on these maps. There will be back and forwards, but again, wait out. What we saw yesterday was there was apparently a concentration of Russian forces, apparently at a medal ceremony in the Kursk region, being hit by HIMARS with large casualties from this. Again, we can see vehicles and stuff being struck here. As far as how many have been KIA, WIA, whatever, again, we don't know. But then today we are seeing this, and this is in Sumy. Of course, when we look at Kursk, we have Sumy Oblast, Kursk Oblast here, and the threat is that logistically it's hard for Ukraine to cross into then Kursk. There's really one road in, and that road's going to be more and more beaten up as the weather gets worse as well. The threat is if Ukraine pull out, Russia's going to cross into Sumy. Russia, from what I have seen, does tend to have the upper hand in ISR here. And today is no different, with a large concentration of Ukrainian forces seen here and vehicles. And then what we see is then Iskander-Ms, which Russia's been having a hell of a lot more success with over this last 12 months, not only industrial making them, but then also other ways for them to get the kill chain, so time on target, against those forces. Now, there's massive claims around how many have been killed or wounded, and I can't confirm any of this, but it does show those long-range strikes, both forward and back. But what I will say, in a war where manpower is one of the deciding factors in attritional war, being able to redevelop your manpower is most often the deciding factor, and could potentially be in this war very, very important. And we're seeing those strikes back into Sumy before these guys can even cross into here. Remember, Ukraine is surrounded on 3 sides in here and will not have the logistical supply or the artillery advantage due to how this is then a push in, and Russia control 3 sides of this and are pushing that back slowly. Of course, Ukraine's argument will be, we've made a kill zone for Russia and they're pouring so many in, that is the advantage. Now, what I was saying here is, well, we can't confirm or deny this, but we do know a lot has taken place. But the Russians, they're saying the same thing. Now, there was a video I got sent from a guy on YouTube called Real Reporter talking about fiber optic controlled drones. Now, I wish this actually talked more about fiber optic controlled drones, because that's I'm very interested in. But a few things we need to take out of this. At 12 minutes 23, now just excuse these are just rough notes on my phone, the Russian soldier speaking to says it's a good thing for Ukrainian militaries in Kursk. The military perspective, they didn't take over any important governmental or industrial complexes. And the thing is, yes, they took over that gas exchange, but now that that gas is turned off, the leverage for that is somewhat gone. At the same time, many thousands are dead now and spent a lot of good Western equipment. So saying basically the same thing, that we just killed many thousands of them, almost the exact same Ukraine is saying. Both are likely correct in this, but what I'll say is, who has more of an acute manpower shortage here? For what reasons? I don't know. And he puts it down to just PR. Now, while we're on this side, we'll talk about a couple more things. He asked him, what if politicians say they want a peace deal? People on the front line wouldn't be happy. A lot of our guys died and got injured, and they want revenge. Russians and Russia, he says, is not tired of war. We do hear similar things come from the Ukrainian soldiers who have made massive sacrifices as well. He speaks on some of the benefits of fiber optic drones, of course, around EW, but something I didn't even think of was the curvature of the Earth and what he calls radio horizon. Now, I'm not a radio guy, I'm not a tech guy, and how mothership drones can get around this. And we have seen these mothership drones as well work in Ukraine and Russia, not en masse, but we have seen them, the Israelis using them too. So look, let me go to my map and I'll just show you, unless you're a flat earther, the Earth is, oh my God, that's bad. How do I get rid of this? Sorry. The Earth is curved something like this. Now, if you're a drone operator standing here, and your drone is operating FPV at, low in behind buildings like this, it's not going to be line of sight, and you can either have very poor or lose connection to this. Of course, FPV can work around this, but curvature of the Earth is still very, very, it looks flat, so it needs to be working at long range. But then what a mothership drone can do, or a repeater, now, some of these motherships send up, come to here, and then release other drones, but what we've seen the Israelis using is a mothership drone like this here, but working as a repeater. So the drone working down here isn't getting its signal from here. It's getting its signal to this and then repeating down. So it can work in highly dense urban environments, closed environments like this. And if you've ever used any radio comms and repeaters, no different to this. But firstly, I said before that I believe no individual is having more of an impact of people turning away from supporting Ukraine. That doesn't mean they're supporting Russia, but it means away from we don't want more of our money going there. We also don't want it going to Russia, but people going, well, I'd rather Trump or this or whatever. No one's having more of an effect on that than Zelensky. And we spoke about some of these elements, like in Kursk. Are you being fed bad information, or do you believe it, or is it propaganda? Is misinformation? I don't know. But Another thing is he's refused to introduce democracy as far as voting. He hasn't taken further steps to limit corruption or poor command, which is having a huge effect on the Ukrainian military's ability at the front line. And instead is shifting the blame for these onto Western deliveries being late. There's a real argument there, but it is not the sole argument. And he's being seen as entitled to hundreds of billions of dollars, and therefore not, and people see that not respectful enough to wear a collar when he's asking for that as well. And this sort of shtick, I think it worked in the beginning, but from me observing this and observing just not only people interested in this war, but others outside of this, I think at the moment many people are just finding him insufferable and ungrateful. And let's go into some other things said in this interview. He says European countries ask to send home Ukrainians who don't work or pay taxes, while those used as cheap labour stay in the EU. Again, it's a little bit like the gender pay gap, that statistically you may be able to show that men earn more than women, but you drill down, you go, well, no, it's because of these. Yes, there may be a pay gap between Ukrainians working in Poland and Poles working in Poland, but you're going to have, well, these Polish workers may have worked here for 20 years and are earning better money in positions in the company. So therefore, yes, statistically it's going to show this, but asked to send home Ukrainians who don't work or pay taxes but are receiving all the humanitarian benefits and stuff like this. This is at the length of this war, people are getting more caught up and going, yeah, we're sort of fucking over it at this point. I tell our partners, provide more air defence and I'll call everyone to return. Again, I don't know if that is the factor in this. It's not going to be air defence, it's going to be success on the battlefield, but also economic opportunity, and that isn't there. So again, it's having a negative effect, I believe, at this point. I'm going to go over something that could fix this. This is further as well here. Ukraine was scheduled to hold a presidential election in March or April 24, concluding Zelensky's first 5-year term. The vote was postponed as the country's constitution does not permit elections under martial law. Somewhat incorrect. Ukraine's constitution does not explicitly forbid elections during martial law, but provides the framework for postponing them under such conditions. So it gives the framework so you don't have to have them, but it doesn't mean you can't have them. Under Article 83 of the Constitution states that the terms of the Verkhovna Rada, the Parliament, and the President can be extended if elections cannot be held during a state of martial law or emergency. It doesn't mean that you can't. It does not permit no. It gives framework to not hold them due to the emergencies, but it doesn't mean you can't. Vladimir Putin sought to use the delay to portray as Zelensky as illegitimate, saying the authorities should pass Parliament Speaker Ruslan Stefanchuk, a claim rejected by Kyiv as distortion of the Constitution. Zelensky has reiterated in this interview, which we've critiqued multiple times already through this, that the presidential and parliamentary elections are not possible under martial law. Again, back to Article 83 of this. But what this gets at is that Putin may ask that Ukraine have some election as far as in negotiations. May go, well, one of the things for us to come to the table is that you then hold elections. And what this can do is Zelensky won't be prepared to do this because he's not as popular as people online may tell you. It could really either change leadership there, but it's not going to be to a more pro-Russian leader. But what it can do is, because Zelensky won't do this, is it will undermine him in the informational space, and Russia be able to stand up and go, well, I thought you were speaking about upholding democracy and this and that, and you won't do it. They may put it there to undermine Zelensky's presidency further. As Ukraine manages to end the hot stage of the war, maintains a strong army and secures powerful security guarantees, martial law can be lifted. He said after martial law ends, there's no need to wait years for elections. So saying that once Ukraine has a strong army, powerful security guarantees, martial law will be lifted and the end of the hot stage. So we have no idea when. When asked whether Ukraine is ready to compromise if Russia sets immediate elections as a condition for peace talks, Zelensky dismissed the idea because it would undermine him, because he won't do it, or maybe banking on people voting in a candidate who wants to end the war rather than someone who wants to continue. Even if that person is extremely pro-Ukraine, if they're pro-Ukrainian but saying we need to end it, that person may get voted in. I see this could be a massive win for Putin if he sets that as a condition, and it's going to be hard as a condition for Zelensky to fight this to like a Trump, because Trump may uphold and go, well, this is democracy you want to participate in. You say you want to return to democracy, we'll introduce democracy. We would violate Ukrainian legislation on behalf of Putin, who has violated all our legislation, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. Yes, but part of the further war taking place. But this would play into Putin's favour. Something you need to see. Zelensky is not as popular as Western leaders, bloggers, and media would have you think. These people mostly are not, on the majority at least, are not going to be voting in this. In my opinion, the best for Ukraine right now, and probably 12 months ago, 18 months ago, would actually be Valery Zaluzhny. He's way more popular internally than Zelensky. He is a military man in a time of martial law and war, and he was, whatever this number is I've typed in here, 10 billion times correct about the counteroffensive stalling and failing and manpower requirements that was needed due with extra mobilisation for further attacks. He's also much liked internationally, as he is liked domestically as well. So I believe he would be a very good fit. Let's have a look at the maps before we talk about what what Russia has said and what one of Zelensky's advisors have then also said. So let's zoom out. Of course, we have Ukraine, the centre of your screen, the capital of Kyiv. The red area is occupied since 22, the purple since 2014. Of course, you see the red check on this area, what Russia is moving over the past 24 hours. You can see around Kurakhove as well as Pokrovsk. So we'll start in around Pokrovsk, and there are some areas coming under occupation today. So Pokrovsk front, not much change on the Suryak map today, but around this Uspenivkia, we can see there is change, so we can confirm that because it is across both maps. But Deep State showing movements around Pishani and Zelene as well. Then we'll just come further south of here, and what it is showing, of course, is this pocket that from Sonsanivka to Stary Turny has closed up. Now, I don't believe that this has closed up over the past 48 hours. I think this has been closed for some time as well. Sukiyali down to, won't try and pronounce it, but this came out of the Uspenivka pocket that Russia is occupying basically all the way down to where this waterway is running. Now, again, I don't believe these are new advancements. I believe they're old advancements coming in, delayed to come in. And then we have what Suryak map is showing us. So out from Sonsanivskia towards Petropavlivkia, that there's been advances here. I think we showed a geolocation of that yesterday. I'm actually positive we did yesterday. Yes, we did show a geolocation of that. But we can also say that, okay, there's been some red here and some red pushing across this waterway here. So look, good odds that has been some advancement down in this direction that Suryak is showing also. Now, let's continue pushing across to the west, and we get to Otokiv, Robotny front, and of course then we have Bilahira. Now, I've shown you in here a geolocation of where there was then a Russian flag flown, I believe yesterday. If I'm incorrect, I'm sorry, but it was in one of the most recent videos, and Suryak confirming there was some level of advancement in here. Now, let's go up a little bit more. Of course, this is Pokrovsk, and then east of Pokrovsk, we see further Russian advancement, then occupying the majority of this centre in here. And this could become another element of a much larger envelopment of everywhere from Konstantinivka, Kramatorsk. We do know Pokrovsk, Kurakhove, these areas are important, but Russia's ultimate goal is going to be Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, as far as the major centres in the Donbass. Now, let's come up into the northeastern corner. We see this grey zone up here, and this was a relatively new assault from the Russians. We see Suryak saying, see this tree line in here, that this has come under occupation by the Russian forces. Again, not being shown in here, but being shown in grey zone, so leads our suspicions one way rather than the other. So let's go through to this last slide here. So, last slide, one of our slides. Now reports this from, of course, Mikhail Podolyak, a presidential advisor. NATO has no chance of defeating Russia without Ukraine. He emphasises that Ukraine's role is critical to the success of the alliance in the ongoing war against Russia. And this is what we hear for so long, and it's just conventionally, militarily incorrect. So, if you truly think that NATO has no chance against Russia, I'm sorry, but then Ukraine has no chance. Let's look at this. Now, I know numbers aren't everything, but numbers like this is everything when it's this much. If it's 20%, 50%, yeah, we can see Ukraine standing up to Russia at 3 times the population, so in hundreds of percent. But let's have a look. NATO's population is 940 million more than Ukraine's, representing a difference of approximately 2,800%. NATO's combined GDP exceeds Ukraine's by approximately 18.1 trillion USD. I don't even make that a week. A difference of 9,800%. Land area, total land area, is 24.47 million square kilometres larger than Ukraine's, a difference of approximately 4,000%. And these are all incredibly relevant in what would become a protracted attritional war fighting on multiple borders. Militarily, conventionally, Russia does not have a hope against NATO. This is why the Soviets, the Russians, lean so heavily into nuclear doctrine, because they know that. Putin knows that. That's why they don't even say it. This idea of Berlin's next is so fucking stupid. Berlin was in the 40s. It's impossible to do at this point in time. It's impossible to do. I would also claim at this point in time, it's impossible the other way too. Just knowing weapons and how manoeuvre warfare has really ended and how boats can be taken in the water, everything. I think we may see the end of great state powers across borders massively, but it's not going to happen, nor has it ever really been said. But there are some threats to NATO and the Western world from Russia, and this is well outside, I guess, of just Ukraine itself. Although, if Ukraine does fall, security guarantees from NATO around the world will mean even less. And that has been degraded, though, through things like what occurred, of course, in Afghanistan. And this is what I've said, and I'll speak on this. Russia's biggest threat to NATO is by playing a leading role in BRICS, of course. NATO, military, BRICS, economic alliance. But economy, military, basically hand in hand. Why do you think that the West is trying to hit NATO, Russia economically to have military changes, okay? And by Russia playing a leading role, the fear is that they will influence China and India to move away from the USD, therefore making US debts impossible to ever repay, moving away from the base economy being the USD. This is why eventually we'll potentially see real pushback against cryptocurrencies as well. But also ideologically. Ideology is a really big threat. The Soviets, in my opinion, had far more of an ideological threat to the West rather than a conventional military threat. We're excluding conventional, we're not talking about nuclear weapons. And Russia and Putin, especially through his decrees, putting to seek like asylum of Westerners wanting to leave, what does he say, the neoliberalism, extreme West, or whatever he puts it. You've seen the decrees, I've shown you. Russia is painting themselves as the last bastion of traditional values, being anti-progressive, anti-woke, pro-nuclear family, pro-religion. And we see this through SVR operations in Asia and in Africa, as well as operations, propaganda campaigns as well, pushing out. But why is this successful? I don't think it's successful because of the propaganda going outward. That may influence. But remember, good propaganda is based on a truth that then you work your way off that. But the emphasis when you push and push and push and push. Now, people in the West are sick of some of this progressive woke order that is coming through. And a lot of people in Asia and a lot of people in Africa also do not want that. So Russia is having a lot of success with this. And is this progressivism losing our military, losing our ferocity of the military and maybe economic around the world? Potentially in the future. And I think ideologically painting as this, I think not now, not in 1 year, not in 5 years, maybe in decades though, I think this is going to be a real threat. Capitalism won over communism, okay? Things could have gone very differently. But now we have the war, I think, between progressive and traditional. And many people are not looking forward. They're looking back and it was actually better back there. And these are what I hold true rather than I hold more important my religion or my nuclear family or blah, 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 rather than this idea of having a rainbow flag at the front of the embassy here. Why do you think you see these Russian pages pushing so heavily when Germany puts up an Israeli and an LGBT flag out the front? Why do you think that gets shared everywhere as well? So I think, that is a real threat to the dominance of the Western states moving forward decades. And by limiting Russia's economic influence and energy, it can draw China down a little bit as well. So there is a real back end happening here. But conventional military strength, no. Right here and now, no. And if Russia did have the strength to challenge NATO militarily, they would have rolled over Ukraine in the predicted 3 days. They wouldn't be struggling around that 20% mark. Now, this is what was said as well, shared by TASS, of course, a Russian state media. Trump team offers nothing interesting in proposals on Ukraine. This comes from Russia's representative to the UN, Vasily Nebenzia. I can't pronounce it, but Donald Trump has offered nothing interesting for Russia yet in his proposal on settling the Ukrainian conflict. There are some unformalized, unclear signals about the readiness for something. We frequently hear the word conflict freezing. Last time it was on December 19th, where Putin outlined clearly and expressly the conditions on which we are ready to talk about not freezing, but completing the conflict. So finishing it there, not freezing it. And of course, this is going to have a problem because what Zelensky has said is we don't have, word to the effect of, we don't have the military power to take back these, but we could stop the war, freeze the war, take them back diplomatically. But what I've said is I don't think Russia would agree to that. They'll keep fighting from a position of strength that they are currently in and will be entering these negotiations in. So it's going to be very difficult. Given the observance of our legitimate security interests, however, there is nothing in signals from the new American administration yet that can evidence that there is something of interest for us. Again, Russia will be entering this given 16 days or 15 days. What date is it? The 4th. So 16 days, unless something dramatic happens either in the Russian economy or Ukraine front line, whatever, Russia will be entering that position of power and will have the upper hand at this. Of course, though, the US has huge influence around the world. Lately, the Ukrainian side has also indicated signals about some accords, which cannot be perceived seriously. The question is what the engagement line will look like when Zelensky, let us presume, finally shows his desire to sit down at a negotiating table. The further it is, the worse the conditions will be for him. He was told about that a long time ago, so it's up to him to decide. So what the Russian envoy here is saying is the longer this goes on, the worse and worse the conditions for you are going to be. And if we look at the deal first, if we are to believe what was released from Ankara, is looking maybe better than what is potentially going to be on the table this time. And what we have said is that if we know what Putin has put out before the Swiss Peace Summit, we know what was said there. And, we seemed ridiculous at the time, to take Oblast, Kherson, Zap, Donetsk, Luhansk, these areas of which Russia doesn't even occupy all of, although occupy the majority of. But if Ukraine end up with a worse deal than that, we can blame Putin for the aggression. We can blame this and that. We can blame the West for someone like Putin ever coming to power as well, because we had a lot of influence on how we acted at the fall of the Soviet Union that led to thugs and mafias and oligarchs as well, of course. But if it ends up worse than that, I think people should be looking internally at politicians going, we blame the aggression on this, but we could have had a better deal. Will things get worse? Well, the way things are looking on the battlefield at the moment, in my opinion, yes. Now, let's talk about gas. Of course, what has been spoken a lot of is a lot of gas being flowing from Russia through Kursk, through pipelines for 3 years to Slovakia and into Eastern and Central Europe from there, and that Ukraine has chosen to turn off the taps here. Now, let's speak about this at length from someone who works in the industry, although I apologise, but I've had to withdraw some parts of this just for personal reasons. I thought I could share, but is a senior person in and around this community. I thought I could share some insight as to why EU countries continued to take natural gas for years, and also why Ukraine also continued to transport. Now, what I would say, if you guys want to look over this in full length, screenshot it, do whatever you want, and go read through it from there. But when you buy natural gas, it's generally like most other commodities. You plan, you're responsible for your own transportation. So you need to look at the transportation as a separate but linked arrangement. So it's not just one arrangement, there's many things in this at once. So take away that. Your contract's pretty straightforward. You specify how much you'd want over the contract period, either by cubic feet meters or joules of this. This allows producers to plan production and not oversell their book. Where things take a turn is around penalty clauses, the main penalty being take or pay, where you have to agree to purchase a specific volume. Say, for example, 80% of the contract over its lifespan, if you want it or not. So you can get punished if you don't uphold your end of the contract. A lot of these commodity contracts probably signed signed pre-22 or part way through the contract. 1 to 7 years is very common in some areas. Any breach of contract, take or pay penalties would be essentially Western countries donating funds to Russia for gas they can sell again elsewhere, likely at a higher price as well. So these contracts were signed, but the contract is signed with many different companies. If this was turned off earlier, as people said this should have been turned off 3 years ago, well, these countries would have to pay out, and a lot of that money would go to Russia. Russia's still going to have the gas and send it elsewhere, so like double dipping. You put your whole mouth in the dip, George. Add onto that breach of contract issues you would have with your customers as a retailer if you suddenly take the moral high ground and say we won't buy Russian gas. A private company, virtue signalling hardly constitutes a force majeure. Now, a force majeure is a contractual clause that frees both parties from an obligation if an extraordinary event prevents one or both parties from performing, and would run through the courts by both customers and Gazprom until they were completely cooked. So again, virtual signaling of a company saying we're going to take the moral high ground, it wouldn't constitute this extraordinary event as far as his experience with this. Then you have transportation separate agreements via numerous pipelines owned by various entities. So there's not just one entity. It's not just Gazprom. There's multiple in this. An example in the Slovakian context, we are both competing gas retailing companies selling in Slovakia. I might be buying my gas, for example, at the Punga gas field and transporting through Ukraine by the UPU Brotherhood pipeline, paying Gazprom until Sudzha. And then this other company, after that, you are, for example, then you're buying yours from the Yamal fields and transporting it via the Yamal pipeline through Belarus. So, of course, it's not just one in here, there's multiple here, and this goes back into those contracts and how this can be so messy. These both meet at the Transgas pipeline in western Ukraine and then out to Slovakia to the local low-pressure networks for general consumption. Again, if you want to go through this or screenshot it. These pipelines need a certain amount of gas in them to maintain pressures and flow in order to operate requirements for Transgas. So this can be used as a bit of a storage facility as well for the safety as far as my reading of this. So, say we entered into commercial arrangements with GSTOU to transport our gas through Ukraine and then suddenly turn the tap off. Then Ukraine would firstly be missing out on big money flowing in from Europe, and technically could end up paying costs to Gazprom via us rightly taking legal action to recover costs, which kind of defeats the purpose. Right, so yeah, if the moral high ground is taken here, we're turning off the taps, then the contract and what he's saying, this force majeure here, from his experience working in gas areas in the West, it's going to defeat the purpose. That money's going to go anyway, and Russia's going to make more money on that because they're still going to have the gas to send. The gas, if you turn it off, you've paid your contract for it. Even if you pay out the contract, the gas still bloody exists. It's like selling a car, keeping the car, and still getting the money. That's why we saw the end of the contract. I think economically it makes sense in all these European countries to keep taking Russian gas. It would have been crippling if it was shut off without any warning. I'm talking at least a year or two. I definitely agree with your focus on industry being the big loser. It is both a fuel source and also for feedstock of certain products such as plastics or ammonia. There are certain industrial heat processes that can't be replicated by electricity, and there are these cogen systems. A lot of gas is used in fire boilers. In theory, it is easy enough to convert to electricity, but expensive. But does talk about others require significant modifications in this, and it's going to take time and money. From his experience with these customers, the larger customers were schools, hospitals, large commercial bakeries. Think about Coles and Woolies, which is our shopping centre, our grocery stores in Australia. We really have two of them, and they're both pricks. But and commercial laundries. This trickles down then to cafes, restaurants, and getting your suit dry cleaned. Staying in a hotel, it all consumes natural gas. So again, this does flow down. That if it's more expensive here, and then it flows and flows and flows. If you're a dry cleaner is paying more at home for bread, they're going to have to charge more on clothes. And this is the whole bloody, what do they call it? The momentum of money then occurring. When considering alternative sources for natural gas, your options are Australia, too far and have to travel the Red Sea. US, exposing yourself to a market that domestically trades double the entire EU volume, and Qatar, again the Red Sea, and also Azerbaijan here as well, potentially through Turkey, but as well, you're opening yourself to market and fluctuations there as well. And it's going to be, of course, we can see from this, more expensive. The shut-off would completely make sense if all Ukraine's existing transport deals expired on the 31st of December 24. Essentially, they would be off the book contractually. But as you said, they won't be making any friends in the EU. So what we've seen is EU countries, Slovakia and NATO countries as well, they can control a lot of the future here, although Germany and France will lean on these countries as well. But this may also greatly benefit Poland. The Yamal pipeline fork into Poland could reopen and gas will continue to flow through Europe. So of course this was closed, but let's have a look here. And this is where Poland could make some fucking coin. So we have Russia, Belarus, Poland, Czech, Austria, Slovakia. And what we can see here is, of course, Ukraine has cut the gas to Germany via Nord Stream, and this has been turned off and now been cut down to Slovakia. But this yellow, this is the Yamal pipeline. This has been closed. Could this reopen? Ukraine will then get none of the money from this, and massive profits flow into Poland's industry and back into Russia. Could this occur? And if you think it's impossible, nothing is impossible. I guarantee that all the people that may be sitting down at the negotiating table, both Russian and Ukrainian and American and European, will be looking at this. If this was the plan all along, it makes Kursk even a weirder place to mount offensive. Sudzha becomes completely worthless and useless as a possible threat. Now, he's broken this down a little bit more. I asked, so just really basically, do you agree that it is worse for the EU than it is for Russia and Ukraine? 100% F's the EU the most. Weakens the bloc's entire economic power, and if Ukraine really wants it to be in the EU, they are fucking their future selves. Good of me to take away one F and not both. Apologies. Russia's fine. They've already found new customers and are building out new pipelines. You don't commit to that kind of infrastructure without solid long-term deals. So these new pipelines, other deals, it's going to be long-term. Remember what we said about that contractual agreement. So if they've got a contractual agreement with Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Mongolia, China, whatever, that infrastructure, those billions you pour into that, you're going to have a contract that protects you in this. Cost won't be seen straight away. It'll depend on what way the EU will go as to the full extent of the effects. We won't be seeing big change in the euro spot market until after winter. It's pretty cyclical, like in the Australian East Coast market. Lower demand over summer, which allows cheap gas to fill up storages, which are then drawn down in winter. You typically build a bit of a stockpile somewhere close to your customers and take from that over busy season. Your contracted demand will always be exceeding your max daily. So remember what we talk about, the penalties for maximum minimums and storage within the pipeline itself. I would imagine if you looked at the Dutch futures for natural gas, you'd see a little jump in the last day or two, but nothing crazy. Okay, let's have a look at the Dutch futures here. Dutch TTF natural gas futures, and I presume this is the right thing. And we have seen this is the 2nd of January here, and we have then early December. Yes, have we seen a slight jump in it on its way down? But is it dramatic as what we've seen over November and October? Not out of this bloody world. Wrong one. This one. Nothing crazy until it's time to refill storages. So of course, all that's going to come back in. And then it's going to hit pretty hard once a few liquid natural gas ships hit the import terminals. It will be impossible to replace the 100% of flow through Ukraine without liquid natural gas. Some can be covered via Turkstream, perhaps depends on the capacity available. We have heard that Turkstream and Bluestream do have limited capacity, and Ukraine is buying American LNG. I did omit one thing in my email because it's where things get a bit cynical. Have a look at Russian LNG imports using those nuclear icebreakers. They are shipping LNG through the Arctic and delivering it to Western Europe. Something like 12 billion cubic metres in the first half of the year. Europe will still consume Russian gas, except they'll pay for the liquefaction and its reversal, so liquid gas to natural gas, as well as sea freight. So, I wonder who sunk the ship carrying the icebreaker parts last week that we spoke about and we've been speaking about for months, saying if Zelensky pulled his head out of his ass for a second, he would realise the smooth brain move he just made. Legends, we're hitting almost an hour on all these videos. I bloody apologise, but look after yourselves. I'll speak to you tomorrow, and I'm going to go get, I can't even say, I was going to say I'll get a Band-Aid. Look after yourselves. I'll speak tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.